Michelle helps Michael Jordan at McDonald's. A moment of kindness that changed everything. It was a chilly evening in Fremont, California, and Michelle, a hard-working single mother, was winding down her shift at McDonald's. The clock showed 11:30 p.m., and in just 30 minutes, she'd be able to go home and catch a few hours of sleep before starting another long day. For Michelle, every moment of rest mattered, especially since she had to juggle her 2 jobs and care for her children, Zoe and Miguel. Yet, despite the exhaustion that clung to her bones, Michelle never lost sight of the purpose driving her, to provide the best life she could for her kids. Her shift had been a steady mix of customers coming in for their late-night cravings. The McDonald's she worked at was one of the few in the area that stayed open 24 hours, so it served as a lifeline for late-night travelers, truck drivers, and workers who were trying to get a bite before heading back to their routines. Although the store was quiet now, Michelle knew how to push through the monotony of the night shifts, keeping her focus on the bigger picture. A picture of her kids smiled back at her from a photo taped to her locker, a reminder of the 2 little souls she worked so tirelessly to support. Zoe, her 9-year-old, had a mischievous smile with a missing front tooth, while Miguel, her 7-year-old, wore glasses that were always slightly too big for him. They were staying with Mrs. Rodriguez, their neighbor, for the night. Michelle glanced at the clock, thinking about them, how she needed to stretch every dollar to make sure rent was paid and that Miguel's shoes, which were worn to the soles, were replaced. "Order up!" Jake from the grill area called, snapping Michelle back to attention. She grabbed the meal bag and handed it off to the sleepy truck driver, who took it with a quiet nod. As he walked out, Michelle couldn't help but think about the growing list of bills waiting at home. The extra night shift hours helped, but it was never quite enough. "Hang in there," she whispered to herself, knowing she had to keep pushing forward for her kids. A few minutes later, Alicia from the drive-thru radioed, asking if Michelle could take the next car since she needed a bathroom break. Michelle agreed and headed to the window. A routine call came through the headset. "Welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you tonight?" A deep, tired voice on the other end requested a large black coffee, 2 double cheeseburgers, and a large order of fries. It was a standard order, one Michelle had taken hundreds of times. Then the customer added, "Oh, and can you throw in an apple pie? I could really use something sweet." As Michelle looked up, the car that rolled into the drive-thru wasn't the usual beat-up sedan or old truck most late-night customers drove. No, this was a sleek, expensive vehicle, a sign that this customer was different. When the window opened, Michelle's breath caught in her throat. Sitting in the driver's seat was none other than Michael Jordan. The basketball legend looked just as he did on TV, yet there was something distinctly human about him in this moment. His eyes were tired, rimmed with dark circles from what must have been an exhausting day. His hair was disheveled, and he wore a t-shirt with a science joke Michelle didn't quite understand. But what struck her the most was the look of sheer exhaustion on his face. She had seen that look many times before, when she herself had worked back-to-back shifts or stayed up late trying to finish school assignments. It was a feeling Michelle knew all too well. When she asked for payment, Michael reached for his wallet but paused. "I'm so sorry," he said, fumbling through his pockets. "I think I left my wallet at the office. I've been working for over 20 hours straight, and my brain isn't working right." He sighed deeply. "I guess I'll have to go back for it." Michelle could see the exhaustion in his eyes, and for a split second she was reminded of how much she had sacrificed for her family. She thought about the times when she had found herself in tight spots, only to be helped by the kindness of strangers who saw her need. It was in that moment of connection that Michelle made a decision that would change her life forever. "Don't worry about it," she said with a smile. "I've got it." Without hesitation, Michelle pulled out her own debit card. It wasn't a huge gesture. After all, she had just $432 left in her account until payday, but it was enough to cover the meal. She swiped the card and handed him the receipt, still a little stunned by the situation unfolding before her. But there was one more thing she felt compelled to do. Without thinking, she added an apple pie to his order. It wasn't much, but sometimes a small gesture of sweetness could make the world of difference. As she handed the bag to Michael, she smiled. "I added an apple pie," she said. "You look like you could use something sweet after working so long." Michael took the bag, then glanced at her name tag, his expression shifting slightly. It was almost as though he recognized her, though that couldn't be right. He had never met her before. Still, there was a moment of something more. Something flickered in his eyes. "Thank you, Michelle," he said, his voice sincere. "That's really kind of you." "No problem, Mr. Jordan," Michelle replied. "Get some rest, okay?" He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "Tell your son Miguel to keep dreaming big." "Thanks again." With that, he drove off into the night, the red brake lights of his car disappearing as Michelle watched him leave. It was just another moment in the long hours of her shift, one that she would soon forget in the rush of life's challenges. She had done something good, something simple, and it felt right. But little did Michelle know that one small act of kindness, a simple gesture born of empathy and understanding, would soon set in motion a chain of events that would change her life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. The viral video and its consequences, a life changed in an instant. The next day, Michelle's life began to change in ways she never could have anticipated. It was just another ordinary afternoon, and she was trying to get through a quiet shift at her second job when her phone buzzed with notifications. At first, she ignored them, assuming they were just spam or messages from friends. But then her sister Lua called 3 times in a row. That's when Michelle's heart skipped a beat. "Michelle, have you seen it? You're all over the internet." Lua's voice was loud and excited, a mixture of disbelief and shock in her tone. "What are you talking about?" Michelle asked, confusion creeping in as she peeled the plastic off her peanut butter sandwich, the cheapest meal she could afford on her break. "The video from last night, the one at McDonald's with Michael Jordan, it's going viral. Everyone's talking about it," Lua said, barely able to contain her excitement. Michelle's stomach dropped. "What video?" She racked her brain, trying to remember the events of the night before, but everything felt like a blur after the long hours of work. The image of Michael Jordan in the drive-thru flashed in her mind, but she couldn't imagine how it could have turned into anything noteworthy. "Wait, how did that even happen?" Michelle's voice trembled as she tried to process what Lua was saying. "You've got to see it. Someone must have posted it from the security footage. It's everywhere now. 3 million views, Michelle." Lua continued, her voice bubbling with excitement. Michelle's mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. She quickly ended the call with her sister and searched the video on her phone. In seconds, the grainy footage appeared on her screen. She watched, in disbelief, as the camera captured the entire interaction. Michael Jordan pulling up to the drive-thru window, fumbling through his pockets, and Michelle, with a smile, paying for his meal and adding the apple pie. The video had been posted under the title, "McDonald's Worker Gives Billionaire Free Food, Humanity at its Finest." Within moments, the comment section exploded with thousands of reactions, praise, admiration, and even speculation about what would come next for Michelle. The words, "McDonald's Angel," filled the comments over and over again, with people expressing their awe at her kindness. But for Michelle, what should have been a moment of pride quickly turned into a whirlwind of anxiety. As she scrolled through the overwhelming flood of likes and comments, her stomach twisted. Was this what it felt like to be famous? Was this what people meant when they said the internet could make someone an overnight sensation? A text popped up from her manager, Mr. Daniels. "See me in my office when you get in tonight." The pit in Michelle's stomach deepened. She had worked at McDonald's for 3 years, never been late, and never called in sick. But the one time she did something that wasn't in the employee handbook, paid for a customer's meal out of her own pocket, was now causing a firestorm. The next few hours passed in a blur of worry and dread. Michelle knew the rules, no free food, not even for the likes of Michael Jordan, but her heart had led her to act in the moment. She wasn't thinking about policies. She was thinking about kindness, and about helping someone who seemed genuinely exhausted and in need. But the McDonald's corporate policy didn't care about her good intentions. It cared about the rules that had been put in place to avoid just such a situation. The video that was meant to showcase human kindness had now become a liability, not just for Michelle, but for the company. Corporate offices were already calling, questioning how this could have happened and what it meant for their brand. Could they afford to allow employees to act on impulse, even if it was out of kindness? When Michelle arrived for her evening shift, the mood in the restaurant was palpably different. A small crowd of people had gathered in the parking lot, most of them holding their phones up, obviously hoping to catch a glimpse of the McDonald's angel they had seen on social media. Michelle felt a mixture of embarrassment and dread as she hurried inside, avoiding their stares. "Lopez, my office!" Mr. Daniels barked when he saw her. His face was a shade of red that matched the uniform Michelle wore every day. He had seen the video, and he was not happy about it. He had been inundated with calls from corporate, and his patience was wearing thin. Inside his office, Mr. Daniels didn't waste time. He clicked his mouse, pulling up the viral video on his computer screen. The room felt suffocating as Michelle sat across from him, knowing exactly what was coming next. "Explain this," he demanded, his voice sharp. Michelle took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had to explain the situation, though she knew there was no way to fix it. "Mr. Daniels, he forgot his wallet. I paid for his meal. That's all. I didn't steal anything," she said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled in her lap. "And the apple pie?" he shot back, raising an eyebrow. "I thought he could use something sweet," Michelle admitted, her throat tightening. Mr. Daniels slammed his hand on the desk in frustration. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Corporate has been calling all day. This is a huge problem. People are calling for you to get a reward for what you did. They want to know if you're getting a free car, a Tesla maybe. Do you think that's what's going to happen here?" Michelle's heart sank. She had hoped her kind act would go unnoticed. It wasn't about the attention. It was about helping another human being in need. But now her simple gesture was spiraling out of control. He pulled out a set of papers, tossing them on the desk in front of her. "You're fired, Michelle. Effective immediately." In that instant, Michelle's world seemed to shatter. Fired, all because she'd chosen kindness over rules. The emotions hit her hard: anger, frustration, disbelief. But beneath it all was a deep sadness. She had done what she thought was right, and now she was paying the price. As she left the office, the murmurs of her co-workers followed her. Michelle couldn't help but feel exposed. She was no longer just a mother trying to make ends meet. She was now the face of a viral sensation, someone whose kindness had gone viral, and with it the consequences she had never expected. Michelle fired for kindness, a job lost over a single decision. The consequences of Michelle's small act of kindness hit her like a ton of bricks. A simple gesture, one that came from a place of empathy and human connection, had led to her dismissal from a job she had worked at for 3 years. The idea that something so pure could result in such a harsh outcome seemed almost incomprehensible to her. How could she be punished for simply doing what felt right? As Michelle sat in the break room, awaiting her inevitable confrontation with Mr. Daniels, her mind raced. She had worked tirelessly for McDonald's, never been late, never called in sick. She had always followed the rules to the letter, making sure her work was done with efficiency and precision. But the one time she made a decision that came from her heart, from a place of genuine kindness, she was being punished. What hurt the most was the irony of the situation. She had helped someone, Michael Jordan no less, a tired man who was clearly exhausted from working non-stop for hours. She had seen his fatigue and thought of the times she had been in his shoes, barely able to keep her eyes open after a long shift. In that moment, she had acted on the same impulse that had once been shown to her by a stranger when her card was declined. It was an act of kindness, pure and simple, but now it was the very thing that was about to cost her everything. Mr. Daniels had been waiting for her when she arrived for her evening shift, his face flushed with anger as he clicked through the viral video of her paying for Michael Jordan's meal. He wasn't upset about the kindness Michelle had shown. No. His anger stemmed from the fact that she had broken a company policy: no free food. That was the only rule that mattered, the only one that corporate cared about. "Explain this," Mr. Daniels had demanded when she entered his office. He didn't want to hear about her intentions. He didn't care about her reasoning. To him, it was black and white. She had given away something without charging for it, and that was unacceptable. No matter how much she explained that she hadn't stolen anything, that she hadn't meant to cause trouble, it didn't matter. The policy was clear. I didn't think it through, Michelle said quietly, her voice trembling as she fought to hold back tears. I just wanted to help him. He was tired, and I saw how hard he had been working. But none of that mattered to Mr. Daniels. All he cared about was that the rules had been broken, and in his eyes, breaking the rules was unforgivable. You're fired, Michelle, he said, his voice cold. You should have thought about that before you decided to give handouts to billionaires. Corporate policy is clear. Michelle's heart sank. She hadn't even considered that the small act of kindness might lead to this. She was just trying to do what was right. Now her life had been turned upside down. She had a family to support. She had bills to pay. How was she supposed to explain this to her children? She could already hear the questions in her mind. What will we do now, Mom? How are we going to make it without that job? The uncertainty of it all made her stomach churn. She had worked so hard to get by, always scraping and fighting for her family's well-being, and now it all seemed like it was slipping away in a single, heart-wrenching moment. As she walked to the locker room, her co-workers looked on with sympathy. Alicia, a fellow employee who had always been friendly, whispered to her, "This isn't fair, Michelle. You paid for his meal. You didn't steal anything." Michelle felt a wave of frustration rise in her chest. It wasn't fair. She had done nothing wrong. In a world where kindness seemed in short supply, why was it that her act of kindness was the thing being punished? Why was she being penalized for showing humanity in a world that so often felt cold and transactional? As she gathered her things from the locker room, her eyes lingered on the photos of her children. Zoe, with her missing front tooth, and Miguel, who had his nose buried in a book, their smiles forever captured in time. She had always done everything for them, sacrificing sleep, time, and energy to make sure they had everything they needed. They were the reason she worked tirelessly, often to the point of exhaustion. They were the reason she put others before herself. Yet now, Michelle was facing the very real possibility that she wouldn't be able to provide for them. The job that had given her the stability she needed was gone, and there was no backup plan. Her mind raced with thoughts of how she was going to pay the rent, how she was going to afford groceries, and how she was going to explain this to her kids. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, threatening to crush her. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, phones in hand, eager to catch a glimpse of the McDonald's angel. But Michelle didn't feel like an angel. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt small, defeated, and exposed. The world had recognized her for all the wrong reasons, and now she had nowhere to turn. As she made her way to the bus stop, she could feel the stares of the people around her. She had become a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. The fame that came with the video wasn't something she wanted. It wasn't something she could use. It was just another weight she had to bear as she tried to figure out how to survive. When Michelle got home, she found her children waiting for her. They had seen the video. They knew what had happened. Miguel's glasses slipped down his nose as he asked, "Mom, why aren't you working at McDonald's anymore? What happened?" Michelle forced a smile, trying to hide the fear that was welling up inside her. "It's just a change, Miguel. Grown-ups have to make changes sometimes." But deep down, Michelle knew this change was a big one. It wasn't just her job that had been taken from her. It was her sense of stability, her belief that if she worked hard enough, things would eventually get better. All of that had been ripped away in an instant, leaving her questioning everything she thought she knew about life. And as she sat there, holding her children close, Michelle realized that the road ahead was going to be a lot harder than she had ever imagined. The unexpected twist, Michael Jordan's recognition, and what happens next. In the midst of the chaos and the emotional storm that had engulfed Michelle's life, something remarkable happened, something that would alter the course of her fate in a way she could never have anticipated. While she was still processing the shock of losing her job and wondering how she was going to provide for her children, across town, in the quiet comfort of his office, Michael Jordan was watching the same viral video that had so quickly thrust Michelle into the spotlight, and as he watched, something stirred within him, an overwhelming sense of recognition, but not in the way most people would expect. Michael had seen the video before. It had gone viral in a matter of hours, with millions of views flooding the internet. News outlets picked it up, and social media erupted with praise for the McDonald's worker who had paid for his meal without hesitation. The world had fallen in love with the McDonald's angel. But there was more to the story than just the act of kindness. There was something about Michelle's face, her warmth, her smile, the way she had looked at him with such genuine care, that seemed oddly familiar to him. As Michael sat back in his office chair, watching the grainy footage from the drive-thru, a small spark of recognition flickered in his mind. It wasn't just that she had paid for his meal, there was something deeper about her, something he couldn't quite place. The more he thought about it, the more the feeling gnawed at him. Where had he seen this woman before? His curiosity piqued, Michael typed Michelle's name into his computer. The search results came up almost immediately. What he found wasn't just her name, it was a story, her story. Michelle Lopez, a single mother, working at McDonald's to support her 2 children, Zoe and Miguel. He dug deeper, looking at her background, her journey, and the struggles she had faced. The more he read, the more he understood why her face had seemed familiar. Her story resonated with him on a level he hadn't expected. A wave of emotion washed over him. Michael understood hardship. He had come from humble beginnings, and he knew what it was like to work tirelessly, day in and day out, just to make ends meet. Michelle's life, as he learned more about it, mirrored so much of his own struggles. She wasn't just a kind stranger in a McDonald's drive-thru. She was a mother doing everything she could to build a better future for her children, fighting against the odds and putting her heart into every decision she made. But there was something else that struck him even more deeply. Michael realized that he wasn't just watching a video. He was witnessing a turning point in Michelle's life, a moment where the world had taken notice of her, but also a moment where the weight of that attention could threaten to crush her. She had acted out of kindness, but the fallout from that kindness had left her vulnerable. The video had become a double-edged sword. While it had garnered praise, it had also caused her to lose her job, her sense of stability, and perhaps her belief in fairness. It was then that Michael decided he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. His recognition of Michelle's struggles wasn't just an emotional reaction, it was a call to action. In that moment, he made a decision that would change Michelle's life forever. He reached out. It wasn't through a public post, nor was it a grand gesture for the cameras. Michael didn't want to make this about him or his fame. He wanted to make it about Michelle. He understood what it felt like to be misunderstood, to have the world judge you based on a moment of vulnerability. He knew what it was like to be caught in the midst of something bigger than yourself, with no way to control the outcome. So, Michael called Michelle directly. At first, Michelle didn't believe it was real. The name on the caller ID seemed like an impossible coincidence, and when she answered, her voice trembled with disbelief. "Hello?" she asked cautiously. "Hi, Michelle, this is Michael Jordan," came the calm, familiar voice on the other end of the line. Michelle's heart skipped a beat. She almost dropped the phone. Was this some kind of joke? But as she listened, it became clear that this wasn't a prank. It was Michael Jordan, the man she had helped without a second thought, the man who was now reaching out to her when she needed it most. "I've been following your story," Michael said, his voice steady but full of compassion. "And I want to help." Michelle felt a lump form in her throat. She had no idea what this meant, but the overwhelming sense of gratitude and awe that she felt in that moment was indescribable. Here was the man she had helped in the drive-thru, and now he was offering his support in return. She had no idea how he had found her, or what he could possibly do to help, but the mere fact that he was taking the time to reach out made her feel like she wasn't alone in this world. "I know the situation has been hard on you," Michael continued, "and I want to make sure you don't have to go through this alone. I've spoken to some people, and we're going to make sure you're taken care of." Tears welled up in Michelle's eyes as she tried to process his words. She had lost so much in the last 24 hours. Her job, her stability, her sense of normalcy, but now she realized that her world was about to change. Michael wasn't just offering a handout, he was offering a lifeline. He wasn't going to let her fall through the cracks. He was going to help her rise above this setback. In the weeks that followed, Michael worked tirelessly behind the scenes, making calls, arranging meetings, and ensuring that Michelle was not left to face the consequences of a kind act on her own. He didn't just want to help her financially. He wanted to help her find her footing again, to rebuild her confidence and restore her sense of purpose. And as Michelle received the support she so desperately needed, she realized something profound. Sometimes the universe places people in our lives at exactly the right moment. Sometimes kindness and recognition come from the most unexpected places. Michael Jordan wasn't just a celebrity reaching out because it was the right thing to do. He was a man who understood her struggle, her pain, and the unfairness of the world that had led her to this point. And now he was going to make sure that Michelle's story didn't end in defeat. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would be shaped by the unlikeliest of allies. The ongoing struggles and hope, Michelle's journey toward a new beginning. Despite the overwhelming surge of support Michelle had received from Michael Jordan, the road ahead was still filled with uncertainty. Yes, she had experienced a moment of relief when Michael reached out to her, offering not only financial help but also moral support. Yet the weight of her situation and the emotional toll it had taken on her was not something that could be solved overnight. The reality was that she was still a single mother, struggling to make ends meet, facing the looming specter of bills, rent, and the needs of her children. The support that had come her way felt like a lifeline, but Michelle knew that she had to continue fighting for her family, one step at a time. Even after Michael's intervention, Michelle's life had been irrevocably changed. She was no longer just a mother working late-night shifts at McDonald's. She was now part of a viral story that had captivated millions. But as Michelle tried to find her footing, the recognition she had gained for her kindness began to feel like a burden. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her, curious glances, whispers, and the unwanted attention that came with being thrust into the public eye. It wasn't the kind of fame she had ever wanted. The small acts of kindness from strangers, messages from people who had been inspired by her, only intensified her sense of isolation. It was humbling, yes, but it also brought with it a strange discomfort. Michelle didn't want to be known as the McDonald's angel. She just wanted to be a mother, a woman doing her best to provide for her children. She had never asked for recognition. She had never expected her simple act of kindness to lead to the kind of fame that came with millions of views and viral praise. What had started as an act of compassion now felt like a shadow that loomed over her every move. With each passing day, Michelle's circumstances grew more pressing. Her job at McDonald's was gone, and her secondary job at the warehouse had cut back her hours. Money was tighter than ever, and the bills, rent, utilities, groceries, her kids' needs were mounting. Michelle had been so focused on trying to balance her responsibilities that she hadn't had time to truly absorb the magnitude of the changes that were happening in her life. She was no longer just facing financial challenges. She was wrestling with a deep sense of failure. In her mind, her act of kindness had been the catalyst for everything that had gone wrong. She couldn't help but wonder, would things have been different if I hadn't helped that man? As she sat at the kitchen table late one evening, surrounded by unopened bills and a near-empty refrigerator, Michelle couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She had been trying to juggle so many things, her kids, the job search, the constant pressure of keeping her family afloat, but it all felt like too much. And yet, despite the overwhelming challenges, something inside her refused to let go. Her kids, Zoe and Miguel, were her constant source of strength. They may have been too young to fully understand the gravity of the situation, but their love and their presence kept her moving forward. Michelle knew that her children were counting on her, that they were looking to her for stability and hope. That knowledge, that responsibility, was both a burden and a blessing. It gave her the courage to keep going, to keep fighting, even on the days when everything felt impossible. One evening, after a particularly discouraging round of job interviews, Michelle returned home to find an envelope in the mail, one that would change the course of her future. It was a letter from a local community organization that had heard about her story through the viral video. The letter contained not only words of encouragement, but also an offer of support, a new job opportunity that could provide a steady income, as well as a scholarship for her to finish the online courses she had been taking in the evenings. It wasn't the solution to all her problems, but it was a lifeline. The letter was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there were still people who cared, still organizations that were willing to extend a hand. Michelle had spent so much time focusing on what she had lost that she had nearly forgotten to look at what she had gained. The community of people who believed in her, who saw her as more than just a viral video, but as a woman with strength, determination, and the capacity to rise above adversity. As she read the letter, a sense of hope began to take root in Michelle's heart. She had felt so small, so insignificant in the face of all her struggles. But now, she realized that her kindness, her willingness to help someone in need, had sparked something greater than she could have ever imagined. It had opened doors for her that she never thought possible. There were still battles to be fought, but she wasn't fighting them alone anymore. Michelle's journey was far from over. She still had to navigate the complexities of single motherhood, the struggle for financial stability, and the emotional toll that came with being in the public eye. But now she had a sense of renewed purpose, a sense that the road ahead, while challenging, was not one she would have to walk alone. The kindness she had shown Michael Jordan had come full circle. What began as a small act of compassion had opened doors to new possibilities, new opportunities, and most importantly, a renewed sense of faith in the goodness of people. In the end, Michelle realized that kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives in ways we cannot always see at the moment. Sometimes, a single act of generosity is the spark that ignites a chain of events that can lead to something extraordinary. And as she tucked her children into bed that night, Michelle whispered a promise to herself. "We'll be okay. I'll make sure of it." Michelle's journey is one of resilience, kindness, and hope. Sometimes the smallest actions can have the greatest impact, even when the world seems overwhelming. How do you think Michelle's story will unfold? What do you think about the unexpected opportunities that arose for her? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and uplift.